Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. We'll start with Fetterman again. I made a Fetterman gibberish video yesterday from my other channel. And then today, there's more Fetterman. As long as he's speaking publicly, there's content, right? And then a bunch more Hollywood celebrities dropping like flies stuff.
They're dropping like flies.
Listen, people are dropping like flies out there.
I am
Boop.
pissed off.
We're dropping like flies around here.
We're dropping like flies here.
Jeez, sir, 2 more just went down. Dropping like flies.
Too many people around here been dropping like flies already, and where's that getting us, huh? Nowhere. Fast.
Biden's being Biden's being an extremist.
Crush that fly.
But first, I want to cover a comment and, the related mentality behind that comment. And so let me find it here. I think it's the most recent one. And here it is. I disagree about less people is better. I was saying that we're entering a depopulation phase. And it's only going to get worse. And I'm saying in reality, it's getting better because less people is better. No matter what people think or say, it's the truth, right? Especially when you think about the planet, but how it affects everyone else. And I'll get into that in a minute. Get into that in a moment. So this guy says, I disagree about less people is better. Think about that concept. People are not the problem. The government is. Well, I can see you cracked the code and you blew me away with your concept. It's amazing how people can't understand that their limited view of something and their, remedial entry-level view of something. Watching my video and just hearing me talk, that maybe I've moved beyond that, right? That it's something I understand. That concept is, it's Truther 101. It's Alex Jones BS, and people say government's the problem. People are great. People are happy. Same thing Tucker Carlson says, and it's completely false. Governments are, have you ever heard of this concept? You get the government you deserve. Governments are a reflection of the people. And so I'm going to go from least sort of intense to most intense, right? So the least intense is, there was a comedian I watched on HBO, he's a young guy, and, he has a different sort of a set, like not, specific jokes, but more conceptualized, more like a George Carlin type of comedian. And he said something where there was, he went to 2 different exercise, gyms, and one was $50 a month and the other was $250 a month. And the equipment in both places was pretty similar. The difference was exclusivity. And he said the first thing that people do when they make money is move away from other people, right? Gated communities, various types of, exclusive places, right? Places that keep everybody else out, the mob out, right? I mean, people who are rich and famous, they go to places where other people can't get into. And they live in exclusive areas. At first class, when you go sit in a first class in a plane, right? You don't have to even deal with the people behind you. They walk past you if you get there early. You're the first to sit down, and then they walk past you, and you never see them again. You're the first to get off, and you have way more room. You don't have to wait in line at the bathroom, like all these things, right? And so that's what people do when they get money and power. They separate themselves from the masses. And that's pretty much across the board. People who win the lottery end up becoming lonely and miserable. They end up cutting off their family members. Other people are constantly hitting them up for money. I mean, there's a high correlation between suicide and lottery winners. But then there's the second aspect of this. The third one's the most intense. And the second aspect is, so if you understand the history behind like non-governmental societies with a weaker government. There's always something, some sort of Aboriginal type of situation, tribal type situations, all these things. They always end up with human sacrifices and all kinds of slavery. I mean, pretty much across the board, all human cultures ended up taking on slaves at some point or another, right? And all the other stuff that goes with it. So even the lack of a government, and these are, more natural human beings, right? Aboriginal people, village-based people, farmers, hunter-gatherers, these kind of things, frontiersmen and these various populations. There is, purity, and there's some wonderful people there, some good people, but it always ends up the same way, right? With some of these sort of deviant behaviors. And on top of it, you don't have the technology. You don't have the lifestyle, which makes things even worse, makes people even weaker, which is why people are even worse now. But if you look around you and you go to Walmart and you go to, any number of places where people hang out, the average people, the masses, you see obese people and you see kids who are obese, right? Generations of obesity where the parents are feeding them poison. I mean, it's carcinogens. It's things that cause cancer. Everyone knows it. Bringing their kids to McDonald's, bringing their kids to places that, are known to kill you. The food is a slow kill. It's going to make you miserable. It's going to make you obese. It's going to destroy your various internal organs, your liver. We know what happens, right? We know what happens with the side effects for so many different pharmaceutical drugs. We know what happens to kids on ADHD drugs and things like this. You now have generations of obesity, and these people never question it at all, right? Never question it. They see their parents dying when they're 50, they're 60, people dying with heart attacks, siblings, and they got their overweight kids and their unhealthy kids, and they still feed them the same poison that's just killed their family members. Never once question it, right? Never once question, well, maybe these people are poisoning us. Maybe this isn't good for us, right? I mean, they're told over and over again in every possible way that it's not good for you. And they keep on eating the same old crappy food, drinking alcohol, self-medicating, drinking drugs and alcohol, knowing what's going to happen, being addicted to fentanyl or other kinds of opioids or whatever it might be, pharmaceutical drugs, taking drugs that have negative side effects, gambling, doing all the things that we know end up poorly. Like we all know how this story ends, right? Over and over again, we've seen it play out, and people still do the same things, self-destructive things. They give their kids the same poisons. They do the same things to them, and that's not the government's fault, right? Like, they have no personal responsibility in that. It's a stupid idea. Oh, if you got rid of the government, people are great. Yeah. These are the same people, if they end up becoming powerful in some way, politicians, celebrities, they will, turn into the same monsters, same selfish monsters as the people pulling the strings. And also, every day people pollute. Every day people throw trash on the ground. Every day people burn drive their cars, drive their whatever, and are adding to the pollution. You can say, well, global warming's a hoax. Well, if you close your garage door and you start the car and you sit in your car for, a half hour, you die, right? If you're breathing in the fumes to your car, you will die, right, from carbon monoxide poisoning. So it's not like your car is pooping out, essential oils, like, angel air or something great. It's putting out poison, right? It's carbon monoxide poisoning. You're adding that to the atmosphere, CO2. And whatever you think about global warming, that, emissions is pollution, right? And you understand the air quality. Go to cities in some of these third world countries, India and some of these places, and see the pollution without any sort of restrictions or any effort on the government's part to curtail the pollution. China and these places. There was a place in China, it was like a lake, and some guy said the water is perfectly clean. The guy in charge of the water, somebody offered him like $100,000 to take a shot glass full of water from this lake, and he declined, right? because it's poisonous. The pollution levels there is just so much toxicity. But then there's just the out and out depravity. Like there's all these cubies that showed up on my channel, and we're talking about the elite and how the elites were all these pedos and horrible people. And I said to them, look, I worked in treatment centers, not just some imaginary internet thing. You may or may not be true. Either people are making it up or exaggerating it, or whatever it might be. It could be disinformation, could be true, right? The stuff you hear, Jeffrey Epstein, all these things that are put out there. We don't know if that guy was even a real person, right? Like, we don't know them personally. We don't know, they even existed. Like, it's all a big show. Like, we can't trust anything that we hear in the media. But what I do know is from my personal experience in treatment centers, I worked in 2 treatment centers, one with what was called sexually reactive kids. And these were boys from the ages of 10 to 14. And then I went and got my master's degree in counseling. And about 8 to 10 years later, I worked in another treatment center with teenage sex offenders who had offended kids and were, many of them had parole officers or, social workers. They were remanded there from the legal system, right? And both cases were horror shows. And there were treatment centers like this all over the country. So this isn't, some... there was multiple places just in Massachusetts and Connecticut area, small states. There was, so many of these treatment centers, right? And there was a waiting list to get in. And so the first place I worked, these kids, most of them had been sexually abused by their parents or a relative, and then they acted it out in school. And the stories, some were worse than others, but they were all bad. And the parents were like nightmares, like horror show parents, right? Some of them came from the inner city urban areas. Some of them came from like deep country areas, places, rural areas. And some were from suburbia. So it was, across the board. So while I was working there was a lot of turnover. There always was. People last there for about 9 months. You're basically in a prison cell, prison environment with, kids who are just acting out and crazy and, on all kinds of different pharmaceutical medications to make them sleep, like tranquilizer type, trazodone, some of these things that would knock an elephant out. It's like these kids would take the pill, they'd be really hyper, violent, crazy, out of control. They take a pill and they turn to a zombie, right? But some of these kids were on 4 or 5 different medications, antipsychotic medications. All the medications were being taken by these young kids. I think every kid was on some sort of pharmaceutical medication just to get them to behave well enough so that you could run the facility. And, it wasn't going to help them. It wasn't addressing their abuse, their trauma, their behaviors. It was just, making them passive. And so there was one time where there was a unit of like young kids there, like kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade, really young kids. I could never work in that unit because the kids would behave in such a way that you'd vomit from, young kids behaving in a sexual way because they had been completely sexualized by their parents, right? And the stories that people told me that people who worked there in that unit, I was like, oh my God. These were little kids, right? And there was a guy there and he worked in the unit and all the kids loved him and he was, popular, but he decided to take the supervisory position in my unit, which was older kids. And the kids hated him. He got into a power struggle with this one kid who was really tough, a kid who was like 14 years old, but he had punched his principal and he was a nightmare, abused by his mom sexually, like just completely demented kid. And they got into these power struggles. There was a time where he brought the kid to court and his mom ran out of the court upset, and the kid freaked out and ran out, so the guy had to restrain him on the stairs of the court, the court building. That kind of, behaviors, those kind of like nightmare scenarios and things. And so the guy wanted to, it was so tense in the unit at that time because there was sort of a revolt as all the kids hated this new supervisor. So he had the brilliant idea to invite all their family members to a picnic at a park. And their families were like, horrible people, criminal, but, they were criminals. Just dysfunctional, ignorant, barely functioning type people who had abused their kids or their relatives had, and they were in just horrible situations. And when they all showed up, the place turned into a frenzy. The kids started to act out. And we were in a park with like other people, like, you know, like normal people. And I remember just sitting there like it was out of control. And like, you know, there wasn't enough staff. And, you know, back then when I was a vegetarian, I was just eating my veggie burger and like crap was flying over my head. Like, you know, like some bad movie, right? And there were some kids who were so disconnected from their family, they had no family. So their families don't show up and they're feeling bad because they're, you know, reminded they don't even have a family or whatever it is. And it was just chaos. And you really have to see something like that to believe it. But you see people like this all the time and you don't know what you're even looking at, right? You see people like this in Walmart or any number of places. I mean, Walmart is the go-to, but it could be anywhere. And there's these low functioning people who are, you know, I mean, it's not just they're abusive, but they're addicted to drugs and they're, you know, ignorant and just, you know, they're de-evolving, right? They're de-evolving. And probably, you know, maybe the worst thing I experienced there, the worst thing that affected me, was there was this one kid who came in. He was 7 years old, but they put him in our unit because he was so sexual. He was so, you know, messed up from his parents. And he had a younger brother, which I didn't really know about, you know, in the beginning. But you read the intake file, and his parents were drug addicts who pimped out this kid and his brother, and they trained them to be to do sexual favors, like from an early age, like when they were toddlers, to perform sexual acts on people for drugs or money or whatever it was, but also train them to be pickpockets and little thieves, like little monkeys, you know, they would, you know, bring them into a drug-infested area, and they lived in horrific places. And, you know, they get them to pickpocket, and they pimp the kids out. And this kid was really sexualized, really effed up, like completely destroyed. And at some point, his brother showed up with a social worker. His brother came in. He was like 3, 4, or 5 years old, real small kid. The other kid was small too, so I can't, whatever it was. But he was younger than 5 years old. He was wearing a little suit with a little bow tie, and, you know, looked like a cute kid. He had glasses, and he looked like a thoughtful, kind of gentle kid, right? And I, you know, and I knew he was sick. Like we'd behind him been told what was happening, but well, you know, I didn't really know. So I talked to this social worker. And I said, "What's wrong with him?" Right? And she goes, "Well, he's dying of AIDS, not HIV. He had AIDS. He was, you know, 4 or 5 years old, 3, 4, 5 years old. His parents had, you know, pimped him out, or they themselves. Their parents were dead now, and maybe they had died of AIDS. One of them, whatever it was." He's coming to say his goodbye to his 7-year-old brother because he was going to be dead in a couple of months, right? And I was just like, oh my God, right? Like just, you know, this was towards the end of my, you know, my working there. And I'd gotten pretty numb to the depravity, but I mean, it just really hit me. Like I just, you know, like just it's almost like a depression, just, you know, that this was what people were doing to their kids and their, I mean, you know, all these things, right? There's another kid there, and he and his family, his family had all died in a fire. He had 3 siblings. He remembered one of his brothers, what he remembered as a young kid, melting. The kid was like 9 years old now, but he remembered, you know, seeing his brother melt, right? Maybe he was like 11 now, I don't know. And he believed the fire was his fault, but he was 5 years old when it happened, right? His parents had left them alone, and the apartment or house caught on fire, and somehow he was rescued, and his 3 siblings were dead. You know, so these kids live with horrible people. If you saw these people, I mean, it's hard to even call them human beings, right? But, you know, if you heard the stories of the parents, one time we had a therapist come in, and she read intake folders for kids, and, you know, the mother had treated their kids really badly. And she said she was at a staff training with all of us. And she said, well, how do you feel about the mom? And you're like, oh, we hate her, right? She's a horrible person. And she goes, okay, let's read about what happened to the mom. And then reads what her parents did to her, you know, generational abuse and depravity. And, it just went on and on and on. It was something that was perpetrated through these generations. And we all suffered from that, from our own dysfunctional parents and the poor training we got from them. And we pass it on to our kids. I mean, we all have some of that in us. And, some of it's the time, some of it's the yuga, some of it has to do with the system and the government. But all of us could do better, right? And, all that stuff isn't the government. I've seen enough here just on the comments people leave and the stupidity. Even this comment. Have you ever heard the concept that everyone would be fine if we didn't have government? Even that remedial concept shows you how bad people suck and lack of personal responsibility and understanding what's really going on here, right? It's a horror show out there. And there's real suffering. Like all those treatment centers I worked in, the 2 treatment centers I worked in, and I worked in outpatient clinics and things like this. And I saw so much of this. I mean, that's how you come into the psychological human service field. You have to work in places like that, either in psych wards or whatever it might be, because that's how they get you. Like, you have to build up enough hours as a counselor or therapist so that you can get a license. And so you could work with, suburban people with money or whatever it might be, a higher level of, therapy that you would do, higher level population. But, even in those groups of people, there's lots of depravity. When there's a serial killer and the neighbors find out the guy's a serial killer, what do they always say? Oh, he's such a nice guy, right? I mean, you never know what's going on inside people, but it's bad. I mean, there's a lot of depravity out there, and it isn't the government. It isn't just governments or corporations or the people who run the system. It's on all levels, and we're all responsible for some of it, right? And there's just, like I said, a lack of people wanting to change. And like I said, they see their kids getting obese. Like they could look at their kids and see their kids are, dreadfully overweight, and they're going to have all these health problems. They're going to the doctor, the kids developing health issues. They can't even move or whatever. And the parents don't do anything to change their diet or to do any research or figure out what's going on. That's just one example, right? Parents giving their kids medications or getting this or that, the other thing. People dropping like flies. I mean, the whole thing here that I do. And they don't do anything. They see it. They won't even believe it, right? There was a woman whose husband got the and friend of my wife's, and he had never been sick. Like she said, he was always healthy, and he just fell apart. He got cancer. He was almost dead. I mean, he was gonna die, and they did enough medical intervening. He had quality health care, and his wife had said don't get it, but he did anyway, and he was going to get it again. Like he didn't believe her, didn't believe that it leave even a possibility that it had something to do with his health or whatever it is, right? I mean, all these things. And, look at people doing that. Like will never admit it. And, things have become so politicized that people don't even want to admit they're wrong. There's one more thing I want to say about this. So my wife sent me this video of a scallop swimming. A scallop looks like a clam. It's inside a shell, and they open and close, and they squirt water, and they swim. And the person says an oyster swimming. It's clearly not an oyster. And so 80% of the comments were that's a scallop, not an oyster. And some of them were hostile, dummy, whatever it is. So the person then wrote, okay, I understand after 5 comments, which I've experienced before, right? And people wrote, and he said, I don't need any more people to tell me it's a scallop, I know. And people responded to that, oh, it's a scallop, right? Just to be douches, right? I mean, this is like stuff we see on the internet every day. People can't wait to tell you you're wrong. Oh, you made a mistake. Right? It's just, look, you made a mistake, and I know more than you do. Look at this. Look at how you really. You can't wait. People won't leave comments. They'll enjoy things. They'll have revelations, epiphanies. They'll laugh. They'll enjoy your videos, and they won't leave one positive comment. But then you make a mistake, and they can't. It's just the suckiness of humanity, right? There's not a lot here to hope for. And there's lots of people who act nice. There's lots of people who pretend they're nice. There's lots of people who want to be seen as nice. So they cover up the stuff that's inside of them, the negative stuff, the stuff they don't want to deal with, the shadow stuff, whatever it is. And they, push it away and, but it's there. You can see it, you can see it. Or they, have good lives and you take away the dream lives that they have and they, they fall apart, right? You have no idea what's inside of people until like there's a war or there's a tragedy or there's something. And, people have perfect marriages, perfect things. And, there's one bad thing that happens and everything falls apart. And there's only, to me, one truly good people. There's one, to me, what I would consider good people. Those are people, and I'm not saying I'm one of them because I'm not, right? Those are people who surrender to God and will do whatever God tells them, and they have a clear channel to God. They're not crazy. They're not demented. They're not, hearing voices. I mean, people have a direct line to God, and they don't devote their service and life to God, and they do whatever they're told through, the process of their hearts and these things, right? Through their connection to divinity. And they're not trying to act good or bad. They're not doing service just to impress other people or put it on a resume. They're doing it, out of the genuine nature of their hearts, and they want to please God. They want to please, they want to feel good about themselves on a soul level, and they just learn to do what's right, and whatever that means, right? Because sometimes doing what's right is, socially unacceptable, but they just do whatever is right because they're following a divine path and not trying to impress other people or get thumbs ups or, become a hero or an icon or something artificially, superficially. They're doing it from a genuine place of deep loving and deep devotion to God. But anyways, let's get back to the depravity and go to Fetterman. Okay, so here he is.
Thank you.
So he comes to the Senate press conference wearing a hoodie, which, I've already made my, I think is a good thing, right? But on top of being underdressed and being socially, not doing what everyone else is doing, he can't speak, right?
Thank you, Senators. Yeah, I'm here for one simple reason. We're here for one simple reason. President Biden needs to consider using the...
Who is this President Biden you speak of?
One simple reason. President Biden needs to consider using the 14th Amendment if necessary. The entire GOP debt ceiling negotiation is a sad charade.
It's a charade.
And that's exactly what's wrong in Washington.
It's the Republicans and their charade.
We're playing with the livelihoods of millions just so the GOP can just...
Look, this guy's shaking his head like he's rocking it, right? Watch.
In Washington. We're playing with the livelihoods of millions just so the GOP can just turn the screws against hungry Americans.
Who are these hungry Americans you speak of? Yesterday he said, he called the Americans tax papers.
This is the whole reason why the 14th Amendment exists. We need to be prepared to be using it. Again, remember, say that again. We must be prepared in order to use it.
Exactly. Say it again.
And we cannot let reckless Republicans hold the economy as a hostage.
What was that last part?
In order to use it. And we cannot let reckless Republicans hold the economy as a hostage.
Don't let the reckless Republicans hold the economy as a hostage.
And an unelected Supreme Court justice will try to blow up our economy. That's on them if they have to judge on that. So.
Or rule on it, whatever you want to call it.
Thank you.
Good job. You rocked it. That's normal, right? So let's go to this. Lauren Boebert slams John Fetterman's unbecoming fashion choice for Senate press conference. And she said, here, John Fetterman redefined casual Friday on Thursday morning. It's truly unbecoming for someone to show up like that to any job, let alone a job that only 100 people are elected to do. There's just no excuse. I 100% disagree with her because what I like about Fetterman is the same thing I liked about Trump. And it gives me great joy because it's a joke. These politicians are a joke. They're bad people. They're often stupid. They're often remedial people. Whatever reason they get these jobs. They're sellouts. They're shills. They've compromised their integrity. And they pretend to be great. And they pretend that what they're doing is great. And they pretend the institutions that they are a part of are great. And they're not. It's all a joke. You ever see these English clowns in their court, these judges and whoever it is, and they're wearing these white wigs? I mean, they look stupid over their hair. They all got these stupid white wigs on. I mean, it's just, ridiculous, right? And, a tie has no purpose. I talked about this recently in one of my videos. Ties don't have any purpose. They're a pain to, you're putting a noose around your neck. They're a pain to put on. And they just hang down. They fall into stuff. They serve no purpose. And suits are, suits can look nice. You feel dressed up, sure, whatever. A wedding here or there. But they're completely unnecessary, right? In fact, most clothing is, it's just not very functional. And these clothes have a way of almost like a, economic hierarchy, like a caste system, right? Like if you're wearing a garbage man suit or a janitor outfit or an apron or, any number of industrialized, metal workers' clothes or overalls and things. Farmer, right, has to wear certain clothes. And, there's a stigma behind it, right? You're just some stupid laborer. And, they even say it, blue-collar jobs. And then you have a white-collar job and you go in there, you make a lot of money for doing almost no physical work, and oftentimes you suck. How many times have you had a bad manager or somebody, a bad boss who's incompetent, successful because the business functions despite their incompetence and their self-sabotaging behaviors? And so it's all a joke, right? Our civilization's a joke, and all these things, it's just a joke. And the dress code is a joke as well. And so it's not just the dress, but it's the fact that the guy cannot articulate anything. He can't listen. He says when he hears other people talking, it sounds like adults sounds on to Charlie Brown. So he can't hear other people. He's had a stroke. He's married to a witch. He's been depressed and he was on psychological medications now. He's doing the Thorazine shuffle, walking around, and he's still able to function in Congress and in the Senate, the second highest political position next to the president. And then you look at this, president with dementia, and every president in my lifetime has been a complete boob and, just stupid and broken in some way. And so it's just a reflection of our whole system. And so it's truth, right? All the rest of it's just an illusion to keep up this pomp and circumstance, but we see it's, Fetterman's a complete joke, and, it's a complete joke. Let's move on here. Teachers union goes AWOL in fight to keep migrant shelters out of schools. After 3 years of school closures, mandates, learning loss, and deteriorating mental health, haven't our city's children suffered enough? Not according to City Hall. This is from the New York Post. Mayor Eric Adams has really outdone himself this time, threatening to kick public school kids from their gyms and libraries to warehouse newly arrived unvetted adult migrants drawn here by his proud proclamation of New York City's welcoming sanctuary status. So, it's really going to be Escape from New York at some point. All right, so there's some kind of thing going on the internets. One of my viewers sent me this, like a prank, and it has to do with Die Suddenly. Let's listen to it here.
Holy shit! What? Simon Cowell dead at 16:30.
No! No! You're kidding.
Dolly Dolly Parton dies at 76.
Are you serious?
John Bon Jovi dead at 60.
Andy Cohen dead at 54.
What? Oh my God, Elton John dead at 75.
Are you kidding me, Katie?
I'm kidding.
Tiger Woods dead at 46.
What?
Tiger Woods dead at 46. It's on the news.
The rumor?
No, seriously, it's on the news.
I sure.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Donald Trump dead at 76.
Stop it! He died?
He's dead at 76.
No.
Heart attack.
What? No.
Oh my God, Mama. Jennifer Lopez dead at 53.
No.
Oh my God. Drew Barrymore dead at 47.
No.
I'm kidding.
Sweetie, don't do that.
Y'all, Kris Jenner dead at 67.
What? Zac Efron dead at 35.
Stop. What the fuck?
That was wonderful. That was wonderful on so many levels. I was going to comment, but the gags themselves are great. The parents' inability to handle celebrity deaths after so much we've seen here. I mean, people dropping like flies, the parents freaking out. I mean, all of it. Like, just the parents just not being like adults. I mean, there's just so much there. But anyways, okay, let's move on to the next thing. Dianne Feinstein suffered brain inflammation as complications from shingles. Aide confirms. Like, she looks like a complete ghoul 20 years ago, 30 years ago. In my whole adult life, Dianne Feinstein has been old and decrepit. My earliest memory of her is I'm like, wow, she's old, right? Just looking, like a ghoul. And now, she's still on these committees, like important committees, like justice committees, to approve the next Supreme Court, like important things. She won't quit, and she's, dying. She's like a corpse up there, right? She can't even do her job, but at least she's more articulate than Fetterman. The world's sixth best young water skier dies suddenly, aged just 18. Mickey Geller competed for Canada and was studying at the University of Louisiana Lafayette when he passed away. And so he died suddenly. I would assume this had some sort of cardiac event here. No further details. Andy Rourke, bassist for the Smiths and Morrissey, dies at 59. Oh my God, 96-year-old woman gets trapped inside motorized Murphy bed after malfunction. I passed out as the bed started to crunch me. Well, that sounds like what would happen. China loans pushing world's poorest countries to the brink of collapse. Doctors searching for answers as stroke risk rises in young people.
The comedy world is mourning one of its own. British comedian Andy Smart has died. He was 63.
The title of this video, Comedian Andy Smart dies unexpectedly at age 63.
In a May 17th tweet to Andy's Twitter account, his daughter Grace writes, "I'm very sorry to let you all know that Dad passed away unexpectedly last night."
Okay, so probably some sort of cardiac event. One of my viewers sent me this. Daily Mail, 1 egg a day lowers your risk of type 2 diabetes. Controversial study says it promotes fatty acids that protect you from disease. And Daily Mail, eating just 1 egg a day increases your risk of diabetes by 60%. Study warns. Well, I'm not going to show you this, but it happens all the time. Brawl breaks out at Disney World after family refused to move for a photo op. There's lots of brawls at Disney World. I've seen more than my fair share of them. Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes loses bid to avoid prison, required to pay $452 million in restitution. So that happened. So she'll never own anything again in her life, basically. She's with some rich guy, but she can't own anything. YouTube star Hank Green, 43, reveals cancer diagnosis. He has Hodgkin's lymphoma. The video titled, "So I Got Cancer." Here he is here. Martha Stewart reacts to critics of Sports Illustrated swimsuit cover. "I've had absolutely no plastic surgery whatsoever." Well, we've seen you look a lot older than this. So they photoshopped the crap out of the cover. Douchebank agrees to pay $75 million to Jeffrey Epstein victims to settle lawsuit. Tori Spelling, "Next level mold was slowly killing my family for 3 years." Tori Spelling is giving a frightening update into the mold that has been slowly killing her family. Well, what is the mold that you speak of? I don't think mold is what's doing it. I mean, mold could be horrible, but... Inside anchor Ken Rosado's last days at WNBC leading to hot mic ouster. Local New York anchor Ken Rosado allegedly spent his final days at WABC 7 struggling with back pain and resenting his co-anchor Shirlene Alcott, according to sources. Insiders believe that Rosario got so frustrated over the station's increasing favor of Alcott that it led him to refer to her as the boop, the C word, in an off-camera comment. The vulgarity resulted in the veteran anchor losing his gig, which sources say paid him $500,000 a year annually. So that's a high price to pay for saying the C word. There they are together. So that happened. Ireland Baldwin gives birth, welcomes first baby with boyfriend RAC. I don't know who RAC is. Alec Baldwin is a grandpa. There they are together. There's that dude there. And all of it. Jimmy Allen apologizes to pregnant wife for humiliating affair amid sexual assault allegations. The country singer and his estranged wife, Alexis Allen, have 2 children together and another one on the way. Things aren't going good for him. Harry and Meghan got into a car chase because they were too cheap for a hotel. Kaboom. It's a zombie bill. GOP sneaks through abortion ban. So, it's a zombie bill. Black astronaut says lunar mission will be major accomplishment in American history. Yeah, it'll be the first time we go to the moon, right? They put black astronaut in here because they're saying that's what's historic. But what would be historic would be the first time that human beings ever reached the moon. Okay, so I got a late jump on the day for this. I didn't start this till like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Usually I do it in the morning. But, wow. I feel wiped out. I don't know. Like, it seems like these Hollywood celebrities dropping like flies keep on getting more and more twisted and intense. And, they're just so weird. Everything's so weird about it, right? But anyways, only spirituality will save this world, as Paul Romano definitely reported from the apocalypse. And the Ascension, everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.